my name is Irene, and in this video, you'll be introduced to materials in Revit. Mainly in this video, we're going to focus on how do they work as a property and how they are managed through the material browser. So let's get to it. Right, so the first thing that we have to do if we're going to be working with materials is we need to see those materials. So we're going to spend an entire video talking about like the visual styles and the ways that we can change the way that we view our project so it looks nicer overall. But for the time being, we're just going to be working with our visual styles. This whole time I have been working with the hidden line, which basically makes it so you only see lines and white. I did a little small edit so you could see the glass in the windows is blue. And again, we will talk about that when we get to visual style edits. But for the time being, what I want to do is I want to change to a style that allows me to see materials. Now, from the options that we have here, I'm going to focus on two of them. So I could go either with textures or I could go with realistic. I'm going to go in this case with realistic. And once you turn on that option, your model should look very different. In this case, very ugly. And that is because we have been ignoring materials this entire time. But materials are not a property that can be or should be ignored. The way that materials work in Revit is that by default, if you do not assign a material to a geometry, that geometry will instead have a default material applied to it. And the way that this default material works is similar to, for example, the layer 0 when you're working, for example, with something like AutoCAD, or the default material if you're working with something like SketchUp. It's basically like a standby, and the understanding is that eventually you will move into something else. So it is not good to have geometry that has no materials applied to it in your model. That's actually pretty bad. But with that out of the way, the first thing that I want to clarify here is the understanding of how materials operate in Revit. Because if you come from other 3D modeling software, not BIM, other 3D modeling software, if you're coming from SketchUp, 3ds Max, Rhino, Blender, Maya, blah, 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 in these programs, materials are really just an aesthetic property. It's a pretty finish that you put in front of a geometry to make it look a certain way. That is not how materials work in Revit. In Revit, materials are a physical property of objects that will actually give that object additional properties. So we're going to see that when we get into the material browser, that some materials have thermal properties. Some materials have like physical and load-bearing properties. All sorts of things are going to be attached to this material. So it is not just about an aesthetic choice. And when it comes to materials, you're not making things look a specific material. You're actually making things be that material. So for example, if I select this door here and I go to edit type, you're going to see that here it's telling me the panel material, frame material, and door handle material. So again, that is not just meaning that that is the appearance property of this door, but it also means that that material may have additional physical properties to consider. It's telling me the panel is made out of wood birch. It's not just it looks like wood birch, okay? So that is the first thing to understand. It's a very different approach to making materials. Materials are now a physical property of objects, and different objects are going to have those different materials depending on the complexity of your geometry. Your geometry may have multiple materials. So for example, if I select a generic wall and I go to edit type and I go to the structure, we're going to spend an entire video talking about this, but you're going to see that if I go to the structural properties of the wall, you're going to see that under material, it is telling me here by category. So this is what I was talking about, that basically default material. So again, this is bad. We see this with generic walls because generic walls are always supposed to be kind of like standbys. Eventually, they are supposed to be replaced with a real wall that then would be made out of brick or concrete or, I don't know, the Oreo stack on top of each other, whatever your material is. But if I go, for example, to, let's say, this wall here, which is not a generic wall, is a basic wall, interior 5-inch partition, like you can see that there's a lot more information on this guy. When I go to the structure, you're going to see that it actually has like a full list of all of the materials that make that wall. And you can even see things such as what is the resistance and the thermal mass of this wall based on the materials that make it. So materials are quite complex in Revit. That being said, we are going to do this very incrementally. We're not going to go all the way into the deep end of what we can do with materials. We're going to start very easy and then we will build complexity. So for this video, I'm just concerned about you understanding the importance of materials in Revit as they contain physical properties for your geometry, and how are we going to find and manage these materials? Now, we're going to do that through the material browser. The material browser can be found in the Manage tab, all the way on the left side and here. So you're going to see materials. Personally, I would assign a quick key to the material browser, since especially in interior design, you're going to use it a lot. So if you don't remember, if you want to assign a quick key, or aka a shortcut, to any property in Revit, you are going to go to File, Options, and then you're going to find that under User Interface, and you're going to find Keyboard Shortcuts. So I'm going to go here, Customize, and I can, for example, search for my material browser, manage settings. I think it is this guy. And I can come here and assign the quick keys. So let's say that in this case, it's going to be, I don't know, let's say Control. Is that good? Yes. Okay, perfect. So if I do that and I go here and I say, okay, now I should be able to bring my material browser simply by pressing Control M. And there it is. Yay. Convenience is very important. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I'm going to make the screen really, really big, and you're going to see why in a second. So what's happening here is that this window, this browser here, actually carries a lot of information. You're not even seeing all of it. When you open your material browser, you should have access to 3 separate windows. Right now, we're only seeing 2 of them. We're seeing our project materials and we're seeing our material properties. The last one that we're missing is down here, and it's the material libraries. So to see it, you can expand it here. There you go. So see, now I can see 1, 2, 3. Again, if I collapse this, then you can only see the project materials and the library. So again, don't be afraid of expanding here. Make this window as big as it needs to be so you can see all of the information that is relevant. So the first thing is, what are these 3 windows? What is their purpose? So these 3 windows are going to carry different information to different levels. So the first one here is your material library. So this here is going to contain the library of materials that you can access in general. So these materials are not specifically in your project. So if you remember when you were installing Revit the first time, it took 10,000 years. So one of the reasons that it takes 10,000 years is because Revit is actually installing a lot of things at the same time. It's installing your families, installing your template, and one of those things that it's installing is this material library. Now, you may not see anything here. Don't panic. That is because you need to expand this home button here. And then you're going to see that by default, your Revit installation comes with AEC materials, which if you expand, now you get access to the full library. Now, AEC corresponds for architecture, engineering, and construction. And you're going to see here a variety of materials. So if I go to ceilings, we have acoustic ceilings, we have fabrics, we have glass, we have some weird things such as gas. And again, we're going to talk about why we have these kind of materials in a later video. So again, these are materials that do not exist in your project. If every project would come with all of these materials loaded in the project, each file would be extremely heavy by default. So the way that Revit works is that it gives you these almost like virtual, it's not cloud because it's not on the internet, it is in your computer, but it gives you these almost virtual library that you can choose from, but you have to actively say, I want this material to be in my project. So see, for example, if I want these glass bronze glazing in my project, I have to select the material and either click on this little arrow to add the material to my project, or I can also click and drag it to my project materials. So my project materials are going to be the materials that are already loaded in this project. So whether the material is currently, and there you go, there's my glass bronze glazing. So whether the material is in use in the project, so that means that let's say that this glass bronze glazing is applied to a window or to a vase or something like that, it doesn't matter. These are just the materials that are loaded into your project, regardless of whether they are applied to a specific geometry or not. So again, these are two different libraries of materials. These are potential materials, so to speak, and these are the actual materials that are in your library. If you're finding it a little bit hard to find the thing that you want, you can use the search bar. And what I really like is that this search bar will search both in your project materials and in the library in general. So for example, if I want to have marble in my project, I could go marble. And you're going to see that there is no marble material in my project, but there is a marble material in the AEC. So I could come here and say, okay, I want to have this marble material in my project. So I'm going to go and I'm going to bring it into my project. Okay. So very handy, very convenient. In later videos, we're going to see how we can create our own libraries, how we can load libraries, edit libraries, the whole shebang. This is just introduction. Now, the right side here is where things get really, really interesting because these are your material properties. Now, I'm going to go here back to the marble just because it's an interesting candidate. You will notice that if you select a material from the library, so just the general library, all of these options here will be grayed out. I cannot interact with any of these things. And this is because the materials in the library are all locked. You cannot change them. In fact, when you look at the AEC material, you're going to see this little lock here, which basically translates to looky, looky, no touchy, touchy. You cannot mess up with these guys. Somebody at the, Autodesk headquarters spent a lot of time putting this library together, and they don't want you to mess up with it. But if I select exactly the same material in my project, here, all of these options are active. So this is interesting because what that means is that when you take a material from the library to your project, what you're actually doing is you're creating a copy of that material. And within the project, Revit allows you to mess up with that material in whichever way makes you happy. Okay, so very important to understand. You can only edit materials once they are in your project. Now, what are the properties of our materials? Well, your materials can have a lot of properties. I think this is the maximum number of properties. You're going to see that some materials have less tabs here. Some of them have more, specifically the physical and thermal properties. You're going to see that some materials do not have those properties, but at the very least, all materials will have identity, graphics, and appearance. So what are these properties? Well, identity is going to carry all the data that is related to your material. Because again, remember, materials are not just about being pretty. These are actual properties. Later down the road, we're going to learn about tags and schedules, and all of that stuff is about extracting data. So when you get to that stuff, the data will be extracted from here. So within identity, you're going to see that you can assign a name to the material. You can give it a description. You can assign a class to it. You can put additional comments on that material. You can assign keywords for when you're doing searches maybe. And even you can give it product information. So for example, if this Calicata marble is coming from a specific manufacturer and it is a specific model, I can assign that. I can give it a cost. I can even put a URL. So that way, when I'm putting together my schedule, I can just click in the link and go directly to the product. You also have these Revit annotation information, Keynote and Mark, which we will ignore for now because we don't know anything about Revit annotations yet. Up next, we have graphics. Now, this one is interesting. It can be a little bit hard to understand so far because we haven't gotten into styles yet. But basically, this is the way that the material will look if you choose the either shaded or consistent colors or hidden lines. So here we can, for example, assign hatches to our materials. So even though you're working with hidden lines, you may want your material to stand out from the rest of your model. So you can do that here. Appearance is going to be where you manage the properties of how this material looks when you have the texture or realistic styles turned on. So this is where you're going to see that the marble looks like marble, and it's also where we're going to be able to assign additional properties to the materials such as transparency, if we wanted to have like bumps or reflectivity or whatnot. We're going to keep it simple to begin with because in this series, I'm not going to go into photorealistic rendering. So I'm going to keep it to being able to create materials that look good just in a stylized rendering. And then we have our physical and thermal properties. So again, these are properties that can be part of calculations. So for example, you have behaviors, you have, there you go, see, like we have some keywords here. You have the basic thermal properties, mechanical properties, strength properties, and under thermal properties, you have conductivity, heat, density, emissivity, all of these properties. Now, Where would you get these properties? Well, from the product provider, or I don't know, like a chart in a big fat book. I usually don't work with these ones as my role as in interior design doesn't require it. But if you have to do things such as calculations for like fire rating, or you have to do calculations for load bearing structures, these properties are super, super important to keep into consideration. But again, for the most part of this introduction to materials, we're really going to focus on appearance, maybe a little bit in graphics. And then finally, when it comes to assigning a material to geometry, the easiest way is going to be to assign the material as the property. So for example, let's say that I want my floor to be marble. So what I can do is I can select my floor geometry, go to edit type, and then I can go here to my structure and say that I want to change this material. So there's two ways that you can do this. If you know the exact name of the material, you can just write it. So if I go here and I type marble and I press enter, it's going to assign the marble material. And if I go here, okay, it's going to now assign that material. So if I go here, okay, you're going to be, ugh. Spoilers, I have a personal vendetta against Revit materials. Don't worry, we're going to spend like a whole video and then you'll hear me rant about it. But if you don't know the name of the material, or you don't remember it, or maybe you typed it and there's a typo somewhere, the other way that you can do it is by clicking on the material property, and then you're going to see this little button with 3 dots. You're going to click on it, and that's going to bring your material browser, and that's going to allow you to select any material. So for example, let's say that I looked at that marble and I was like, Jesus, no, let's go with anything else. Let's say that I want it to be a wooden floor. So I'm going to go wood, and I'm going to come here and say, do we have any wood flooring that is not horrendous? I'm not sure. Let's go with these wood planks here. How bad can they be? We're going to go okay, and okay, and okay, and they're not terrible. I'll forgive them. And there you go. So this is how you can assign materials to your geometry. If you have a geometry where the materials are multiple options, for example, in the case of my door, then you can go and change each and every one of them. If you're working with model in place components, you're going to have to go inside the geometry. So let's say, for example, I'm going to double click in this guy here to go to edit mode. And what I can do here is select the geometry. So let's say, oh Christ, these are arrays. Yes. So actually, let me start just with this geometry here, since it's a little bit simpler. Tab. Yeah, let's say this guy here. So I can select this guy here, and you're going to see that in a simple geometry like this, the property is not going to be a type property, and instead it's going to be an instance property. So you can see it right here. See, material. So let's say that this guy will be my marble. And when I click outside, there you go. See, now this guy's marble. Oh, did I delete? No, that guy's there. Now, interestingly enough, with arrays, you're going to see that there's no material property here. And that is because arrays are a kind of grouping, and you cannot assign a material to a group. You can only assign materials to geometry. So if I want to assign a material to these little slats, I have to go inside the array. And when I go inside the array, now I can select the geometry, and now I can assign a material to it. So here I can say marble, and that will assign that marble material to all copies of the geometry within the array. So when I say okay, it's going to change all of them at the same time. The reason that these guys didn't change is because they are a different array. They are a different entity altogether. So we're going to go here and say you're going to be marble. There you go. And then let's finish off with these guys here and say you too will be marble. Spoilers, they will not remain these color. These color is horrendous and I hate it. We will be editing materials very soon. But there you have it. This is how you can assign materials to geometry, and now you know where to find them. But with that, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you find that helpful. If you have any questions, by all means, feel free to reach out. Feel free to also like and subscribe. That way, when a new video comes out, you will get a notification. But otherwise, thank you very much for joining in. Thank you very much for sticking through, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye.